The following is a Mad Owl presentation.
And now, Galactic Blue presents the closing tag. Here is your host, Raul Smith.
Hi guys. So normally I would take this open and do my very loud, very boisterous introduction. Just in case you didn't know, by the way, I'm Raul Smith. I'm the president, CEO, co-founder, and lead developer for Galactic Blue. I have that little thing right there. Cool. Anyway, but with this episode, because I've been out for a while, I wanted to kind of clear the air on what exactly has been going on. First of all, in case this isn't a dead enough giveaway right now, no pun intended, I'm not dead. I'm far from it. I am not committed or institutionalized, even though some people probably believe I should be. But not everything is roses and sunshine at the moment, and I'll explain. So about 3 weeks ago, well, 4 weeks ago actually, I went to bed feeling a bit uneasy, just thought nothing of it, chalked up as me being tired because the workaholic that I am probably burned the candle a little bit too close to the hand on both ends this time. Went to sleep just thinking everything was normal and woke up at about 2 o'clock in the morning the next day feeling extremely dizzy and disoriented to the point where I was physically ill. So after about 12 hours of trying to go back to sleep and vomiting and trying not to fall out of bed, I decided enough was enough. I went to the hospital and tried to figure out what was wrong. So that night, they did some CAT scans of my brain. Thankfully, they ruled out the possibility of a stroke. So you don't have to worry about stroke right now, which is awesome. They did, however, notice some unusual activity going on right here in the front. And that's usually where the eardrums are connected, right? So the doctor proceeded to tell me that I have an acute case of vertigo. So depending on who you ask in my family, I was diagnosed at a very early age, anywhere from 6 months of age to about 3 years old, with a very severe inner ear infection. As a result of that and a botched surgery that almost left me completely deaf right here, I had to go through extensive hearing and balancing tests throughout my entire grade school life, as far up as 7th grade. It's one of the reasons why I can't really wear in-ear earbuds for very long. The belief in, and I have to go in to see a neurologist to just kind of confirm this belief. A recent activity or stressor or something loosened or damaged my ear somewhere in here, just enough to trigger the imbalance and thus resulting in my vertigo attack. Now, what does this all mean for the podcast? Well, I'll still be doing it, don't worry. I will, however, be scaling back a bit. So instead of once a week like I was planning, it's going to have to go back to the once or twice a month format that we've been doing. So also means that I will probably be taking some time off in May or June or July. So if you see if you see me post a best of episode around that time, just know that's my cue to let you know that stuff's going on. and I hope to be all fixed up and good to go. After that, it's tough to say what's going to happen. I can't predict the future as much as I would like to. I wouldn't be hosting a podcast if I could predict the future. I promise you that. Now, would I be able to do weekly episodes again? I don't know. Would I even be able to continue doing the podcast by that point? I don't know. I can't predict the future. I'd love to be able to sit here and say yes to all of the above, but it's a wait and see approach at this point. Now, for all the people online or offline, whether they're on Twitter or Facebook or, people in real life, like my sister, my ex, and her family and whatnot, the people that have shown support through all of this, I cannot express how much I appreciate each and every person that's done that. You are appreciated far more than you could possibly know. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything. So, with all of that said, let's dive into this party and dive into some tech news.
Here is some tech news.
Some major changes have already been hinted in the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, who could have seen this coming? For reference, the last episode of the podcast, the one titled The Rise and Glorious Fall of Activision Blizzard, just for reference. Anyway, Microsoft gaming executive Phil Spencer has already stated that regardless of the outcome of the potential acquisition, current Activision Blizzard CEO and chief scumbag officer of the human race, Bobby Kotick, will not be sticking around for much longer. Should the acquisition meet SEC and FTC guidelines, and we'll get back to the SEC part here in a bit, Kotick would be forced to unconditionally resign from the company. However, there is a caveat, and you had to know this was coming. Kotick could potentially receive as much as $22 million in stock as early as July this year, assuming company culture at Activision Blizzard improves. Yeah, good luck with that. Should he be fired without cause, either by Activision Blizzard or Microsoft, Kotick could receive what they're calling a $15 million golden parachute. Now, to his credit, Kotick did agree to a pay cut back in October in direct response to the company's sexual assault and harassment scandals and agreed to forego any bonuses until the board saw improvement. But I, the pragmatist, would rather chalk that up to even shit knows when it stinks. Additionally, Spencer has already stated that the company, should the acquisition happen, would undergo a major change in the human resources department and that any employee associated with the allegations in the past would be heavily reviewed before being allowed to continue working at Activision Blizzard. So, literally every frat boy that was participating in cube crawls or passing around nude photos of female coworkers might want to start freshening up those resumes right about now. Again, I don't root for people to lose their jobs, especially in a major corporate merger like this one, because I've been there. I know the uncertainty, the feeling of uncertainty, and the feeling of what the hell is tomorrow going to bring? I hate that feeling, and I would never wish that on people. But in this case, I really hope these people lose their jobs. Now, I mentioned the SEC. Let's bring that back a little bit here. There is a lawsuit being filed with the SEC against Microsoft over the Activision Blizzard acquisition. The lawsuit, according to the lawsuit, which was filed by two Activision Blizzard shareholders back on February 24th, the board of directors at Activision Blizzard were looking to, and I quote, procure for themselves and senior management significant and immediate benefits, end quote. The lawsuit also alleges that Activision Blizzard's filing with the SEC is materially misleading and incomplete, and that it violates the Securities Exchange Act. Now, this lawsuit does have merit, as it came out publicly recently that Kotick initiated the discussions with representatives from Microsoft and several other potential suitors about a possible acquisition back in October. Just a little too close in the timeline with the sexual assault and harassment allegations. A little too close to be calling it coincidence. It certainly feels like Kotick and the board knew that things were going to get out of control, and they were looking for a quick little payday before piecing out. As always, this will be a very interesting development to follow in the coming weeks and months. So, mere days after the announcement of the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard, Sony announced that they too are in the buying market. Sony is buying Bungie for $3.6 billion. That's with a B. Bungie will continue to run as an independent subsidiary of Sony Interactive Entertainment even after the merger is finalized. The studio is best known for its work back in the early 2000s with the early installments of Halo. Some may argue that that would be the time that the Halo franchise was at its best. And more recently, with the Destiny franchise, so with that, Bungie already has a working relationship with Sony built in. But now with this acquisition, they will be exclusive to the PlayStation. So adding this to what was already a very busy January for gaming acquisitions, I mean, on top of the obvious ones, there was also Take-Two. Wow, that took me 3 takes to even say that. Take-Two buying the mobile gaming studio Zynga, more popularly known for Farmville back in the day. They bought them out for $12.7 billion. It's clear to see that gaming studios are quickly becoming a hot commodity in today's business sector. By the way, detour for like 2 seconds. Who else here, and you guys can be honest, wasted just countless hours back in the early days of Facebook just playing Farmville? No one? Just me? All right. Coming off the heels of their portable gaming device, the Steam Deck. By the way, don't get it just yet. From what I'm hearing, there's some bugs. I'd wait about 6 months on this one. Anyway, maybe even push it out a little bit to maybe the holiday season if you can time it just right. That'd be awesome. Anyway, Valve has announced that they are looking to add the Microsoft Game Pass to the Steam platform. Valve CEO Gabe Newell announced Steam does not plan to create a competitor to the popular subscription gaming service, but that it would be happy to work with Microsoft to bring the PC version of its Game Pass to Steam. He stated, quote, "I don't think it's something that we need to do ourselves, building a subscription service at this time. But for their customers, it's clearly a popular option, and we'd be more than happy to work with them to get that on Steam." End quote. Discussions have been ongoing with Microsoft and Valve about bringing Game Pass to Steam, but the discussions are still very much in their early stages. The part that might be a buzzkill for both sides could be the percentage of sales that Steam would get. Typically, Valve gets about 30% of software sales revenue through its Steam store, and has been known to bring it down to 20% when it surpasses like the $50 million mark. But it's too soon to tell how it responds to subscription services. Right now, EA Play is on Steam, but only on the basic tier. EA Play Pro is still exclusive to their Origin launcher. Microsoft currently does not plan to have PC Game Pass on Steam, but that could change depending on the success of the Steam Deck device. Now, additionally, there are talks about Microsoft having the Steam app, I should say, available in the Microsoft Windows App Store for Windows 11. So right now, as it stands, don't expect for PC Game Pass to be on Steam anytime soon. But as we learned with Activision Blizzard, when it comes to Microsoft, never say never. Tom's Hardware and PC Gamer both wrote about a recent utility called NVIDIA RTX LHR V2 Unlocker, which claimed to remove NVIDIA's light hash rate software that was implemented in newer graphics cards to deter crypto miners from buying gaming GPUs. However, there was one problem with the unlocker. According to the YouTube channel Red Panda Mining, members of multiple mining communities discovered that the tool contained multiple viruses. More importantly, after further hands-on examination, Tom's Hardware concluded that the tool doesn't even perform its namesake function of removing the cap on the hash rate of the GPU. Instead of, it apparently infects your system and causes a host of other unusual behavior like high CPU use, high CPU usage, checking for system drives, and other things that should and ultimately did raise some serious red flags. There's a saying in the computer industry, and it's as old as time. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And more often than not, it contains malware or viruses and could potentially cause significant damage to your machine. Lesson learned. Well, chalk this up as should have seen this coming. Google is no longer requiring its workers based in the United States to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Google spokesperson Laura Lee Erickson, and no, I'm not making that name up, said in a statement to the online tech magazine The Verge, quote, "We're not enforcing vaccination requirements as a condition of employment for U.S. office workers at this time. We're continuing to implement our vaccination policy requiring COVID-19 vaccinations or approved accommodations for any individuals accessing our sites because it's one of the most important ways we can keep our workforce safe and keep our services running, end quote. Erickson would go on to say, quote, Google's original vaccination policy announced last July remains in place, which requires COVID-19 vaccinations or approved accommodations for anyone accessing our sites, end quote. Listen, you had to know this was coming. Ever since the CDC downgraded COVID-19 to where mask mandates were no longer required, you had to know companies were going to start easing up. It was only a matter of time. COVID at this stage is now on the same level as the cold and the flu. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, almost assuredly not in our lifetimes. And to think so is really hoping against hope. Meanwhile, travel restrictions are still in place for anybody traveling outside the United States, with wait times in quarantine lasting as long as 16 days. So just be prepared if you decide to take that awesome vacation to the Bahamas and are looking to accrue enough paid time off to do so. So the Marvel shows that were on Netflix, so Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Punisher, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, are no longer on Netflix as of now. That's the bad news. The good news is that they are coming to Disney Plus. Furthermore, on top of cameo appearances already made by Matt Murdock and Kingpin in MCU properties, kind of a spoiler there, but whatever. It's all over the internet at this point. There is talk of bringing the actors for both Luke Cage and Jessica Jones into the MCU at some point. Also, there is talk that both Kingpin and Murdock will be appearing in the upcoming Doctor Strange movie in May. As a guy that's kind of a comic book dork, I'm excited for this. Kingpin is one of those iconic villains in comic book lore, maybe the most iconic in Marvel. And Daredevil, come on. What can be said that hasn't been said already about this guy? A blind lawyer who seeks justice similar to Batman. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? Now, I would very much like to see an arm wrestling contest between Luke Cage and the Hulk. I mean, yeah, the Hulk's probably going to win that one, but it would still be entertaining. So in meta news, as in the company formerly known as Facebook, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced that Meta is testing an artificial intelligence system that lets people build parts of virtual worlds by describing them verbally. Proof of the concept, called BuilderBot, could eventually draw more people into Meta's Horizon metaverse virtual reality experiences. It could also advance creative AI tech that powers machine-generated art. Now, pardon me for just a minute, but is it just me, or is there something a little off about this whole thing being called Horizon? Gamer nerd. Anyway, BuilderBot can do simple landscapes like beaches and mountains, and even some a little more complex. It uses voice input from the user to add 3D objects that users can walk around, and Meta is aiming for more ambitious interactions. Zuckerberg, who obviously took the concept from Star Trek's holosuites, but we'll leave that alone, did admit that the project still has a lot of work to do. So don't expect to go to the virtual park anytime soon. Meanwhile, another ambitious project on Meta's board has been a universal speech translator app. Speaking of things that he's borrowing from Star Trek, The company says that although mainly commonly spoken languages like English, Spanish, and Mandarin are well catered to by current translation tools, roughly 20% of the world's population do not speak these languages and are often feeling left out. Meta is calling the project No Language Left Behind and will concentrate on building AI models that can learn to translate languages using fewer training examples. Furthermore, they hope to have a system that will aim to build other systems building systems, that's a scary thought, that will directly translate speech in real time from one language to another without the need for a written component to serve as an intermediary, which is common among many translation apps such as Google Translator. Again, just like the virtual world technology, Meta still has a long way to go to make this technology a reality. But if they can pull this off, this will be another step towards science fiction, Star Trek, becoming science reality. So one thing that doesn't need more time developing, and in fact, it's been out of beta, so to speak, for the last couple of years, has been this amazing movie that I'm going to keep plugging on this podcast. The Telltale Heart is an award-winning film adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's short story, which takes a headfirst deep dive into the Sea of Madness, retelling a classic psychological thriller with a mind-bending, pulse-pounding, bloody, disgusting film. Starring award-winning actor Sonny Grimsley and directed by the brilliant McLean Lindquist, The Telltale Heart has won awards and made appearances in many short film and independent film festivals, ranging from the FilmQuest Film Festival in Provo, Utah, to being awarded Best Short Film at the Minefield Film Festival in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to more recently being selected to the Eurasia Fest International Film Festival in Moscow, Russia, where McLean Lindquist won Best Director, hopefully before everything went crazy, and the horrific Hope Film Festival in Richmond, Virginia, to winning Best Short Film at the Bayamon International Film Festival in Puerto Rico, to appearing in over 60, that's 60, international film festivals throughout the world. Revisit Edgar Allan Poe's short story, as this film brings more than just a classic horror story to a new audience, but also discovers a creative way to explore the groundbreaking psychological thriller. The narrative is enhanced through an unprecedented use of sounds and light, and the characters blend a modern sensibility with anachronistic charm, as seen through an unsettling array of time and space, while a shifting setting disorients the unwitting audience. What is seen and what is heard leads the perplexed audience to ask, what is insanity and what truly constitutes reality? TelltaleMovie.com for more information on this brilliantly insane thriller.
Nobody cares about my white boy blue.
So an argument that I got into online a while back, this was obviously before the Vertigo attack, was about the Joe Rogan controversy. You know the one. For those that haven't been paying attention to everything that's going on, Joe Rogan has a podcast. Everybody has a podcast these days. Almost assuredly on the same platform that you're listening to this podcast currently. Joe Rogan has said some pretty ignorant stuff lately about vaccinations. I mean, the usual trope, it's nothing you haven't heard before. It alters your DNA. It is made from aborted fetal cells. It's not that effective. It contains harmful chemicals, so on and so on and so forth. Anyway, well, a number of musicians, most notably Neil Young, have pulled all their music off of Spotify in response to Rogan's comments, deeming that his comments could result in more COVID-19 deaths, with a global death toll quickly approaching Holocaust numbers. I'm not exaggerating. It's getting to the 6 million mark at this point. It's insane. But anyway, meanwhile, the word around the water cooler was that Rogan's podcast, this was back in like early February, could potentially be pulled from Spotify over the vaccination comments, which anybody that knows anything about podcasting, and I happen to know a thing or two because I am hosting a podcast here, knew that that was not going to happen. But that didn't stop the Trumpy marks from going on Twitter and Facebook and comparing Spotify pulling Rogan to the state of Texas banning books that have anything to do with bringing up racism or critical race theory. Well, I am here to inform all of you the same thing I informed them. I don't know who needs to hear this or how loud I need to say this, so here it goes. These are not, I repeat, not one and the same. So let me slow it down and repeat it again for those in the back that have your red hats on proud display on your heads. Maybe a little bit too tight on your heads. Trust me, it causes headaches. It's a pain in the head, literal. You might want to loosen it up a little bit. Maybe get a different size. I don't know. Anyway, you ready? Okay. These are not one and the same. One, Spotify, is a private business, albeit a very popular and prominent one, telling one of its suppliers or vendors that it no longer wants to do business with them because it is harmful to their bottom line. The other is a state legislated ban on literature for no reason other than to hell with it. We feel like it. That's literally what any ban on critical race theory is. It's like, we don't feel like talking about this, so we're not going to, and we're not going to let other people read about it. That's basically what it is. The idea of Spotify pulling Joe Rogan or any podcast off its platform because they disagree with the views on that podcast, or because that podcast is doing more harm than good staying on their service, is not cancel culture. It's not government censorship. Do you know what would be government censorship or cancel culture? Let me give you an example here as it relates to this particular podcast, to me. If the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, who regulates everything that's said on terrestrial radio, so anything on your AM or FM dial, they are the lords and leaders of what can and cannot be said on that particular station, right? If the FCC decided one day that podcasts can't use the words fuck, shit, or damn on their podcasts and threaten to pull those podcasts off the airwaves if they didn't comply, that would be government censorship. Or, wild spitball theory here, I don't see this happening at all, but let's hypothetical play along here. If President Biden threatened to put an edict on all podcasts mentioning the war between Russia and Ukraine that didn't paint the United States in this positively glowing light, that would be government censorship. So, don't give me this ridiculous statement that Spotify, even remotely possibly pulling Joe Rogan, is anywhere near the same thing as Texas banning all books that have critical race theory in them. Furthermore, and this is another classic example of comparing apples to avocados, banning someone from social media is not the same as banning books. Again, Facebook and Twitter, among other social media outlets, whether you agree with them or not, are privately owned companies that could very easily decide on their own one day that a certain public figure, let's just use a real life example here, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, isn't worth the trouble and decide it's best to not have that person inciting hate and misinformation on their platform. Likewise, if they feel you or I are violating their terms of service too many times, you know, the terms of service you clearly didn't read but agreed to anyway when you signed up for a Twitter or Facebook account, and have given us soft ban after soft ban after warning after soft ban after warning, they have the right to then ban that person from using that platform ever again. It is within their right to do so. For the record, so we're clear on this, I am not in favor of Joe Rogan or any podcast being pulled because of questionable content. I feel like podcasts these days are very selective, and everybody and their dog has a podcast these days. So a listener almost has to go out of their way to go listen to a podcast. Nobody stumbles onto a podcast by accident. You don't stumble upon this podcast by accident. You go looking for it, whether it be for myself or for the title of the podcast. Maybe you heard someone else talk about it, or maybe it touches on a topic that you're passionate about. Nobody stumbles upon a podcast by accident. Now, they either listen because they're a fan, or they're curious about the show, or it touches on a topic or discussion that they care about. If people are looking for podcasts that skew more to their beliefs, they're going to find them. Be it Joe Rogan or anybody else for that matter. Censoring one for questionable content sets a very dangerous precedent that I'm not sure Spotify or any other provider wants to venture down that road. That being said, so we're clear, I don't agree with Joe Rogan being pulled from Spotify. I don't agree with Joe Rogan when he says stuff like this. It's fine. Let him have his day. It's fine. Whatever. Anyway, Since we all have all of that cleared, out on the table, can we all just stop with these ridiculous comparisons once and for all? You're getting tired of hearing me say this stuff episode after episode after episode. Quite frankly, contrary to popular belief, I'm getting tired of saying the same things over and over and over and over. Can we please let's move on to a different topic, maybe a little bit happier topic. I don't know. Maybe like the one that's coming up. Hi there, Raul Smith here with a very helpful tip that I think will save you a lot of time and headaches as you build a website. Have you spent hours just on your laptop and just typing endless content for your website or your client's website, and then come to find out there's a spelling error? There should be 2 R's there. What the hell? Anyway, we'll fix that later. Anyway, spelling errors and grammar errors are a #1 cause for customers to not come back to a website that doesn't involve load times. In fact, science suggests that spelling errors on a website will cause more customers to not come back than images not loading. So I have a solution to this. If you're just coding websites from scratch as opposed to using WordPress or Drupal or whatnot. In your web browser, search for Google Docs. It is a free Microsoft Word type word processor. Type in your content in a blank document, copy paste it into your IDE or text editor of choice. I like using Visual Studio Code because that's how I roll. Style and HTML it up, and boom. The days of having spelling errors on your website are over. Now, why is that? Well, much like with Microsoft Word, Google Docs word processor has the ability to autocorrect and easily identify spelling errors on the fly. Without extensive testing that may or may not even be that efficient, human eyes can only see so much, and we sometimes train ourselves to look past spelling errors sometimes, which is a horrible habit, speaking from experience. Now, if you're using a web templating platform like WordPress or Drupal or so forth, all that stuff is already built in. It'll automatically catch all of that. So you should be good there. I hope this tip helps you save time and headaches as you build something amazing. In fact, if you end up building something as you're listening to this podcast, send it my way. I'd love to be able to look at it. Send it to Raul at theclosingtag.com. That's RAUL at theclosingtag.com. I look forward to seeing what you built. So there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the NBA and the TNT crew and their handling of mental health as of late. In particular, it has to do with the TNT crew's handling of some comments as of late by Golden State Warriors forward Draymond Green regarding Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert. So let's backtrack a little bit. So a few years ago, there was serious consideration for adding Rudy Gobert to the All-Star reserves, so much so that before that season, then Jazz executive Dennis Lindsey worked a deal into Gobert's contract that stated that he could make an additional $1 million if he made the All-Star team. So $1 million performance-based incentive, essentially. Well, Gobert did not make the team at that time. After the announcement, he was talking very openly and candidly about not making the All-Star team and having the conversation with his mom back in France about not making the team. It was at that point during the interview or during the press conference that these years ago that Gobert started to cry. Well, there's a common misnomer about why he started crying during this press conference. Many believe he was crying because he didn't make the All-Star team, which is not true. The truth is, he wasn't crying about that until he started talking about his mom. As someone of a mama's boy himself, I can relate. I can sympathize with Gobert feeling like he may have disappointed his mom by not making the team. Well, a few years later, Gobert now has 3 All-Star appearances under his belt, along with his 3, soon to be 4, Defensive Player of the Year awards. Yes, I said it. Well, this has not stopped Draymond Green from opening his big mouth about Gobert again. Quote, "Oh, it's a good thing he made the team. We don't need him crying again." The worst part about all this, though, the part that irks me more than anything, was that Shaq and Kenny Smith openly laughed at the very unfunny joke. The worst part of all of this, though, TNT, days after they aired this on their airwaves, had the temerity and unmitigated gall to put out a tweet on Twitter just days later promoting mental health awareness. First and foremost, if you're going to be putting out a social media post of any kind promoting mental health awareness, just days after condoning several of your employees mocking a man's mental health, the least you could do is put out a statement from Turner saying that you don't condone the actions of Kenny Smith and Shaquille O'Neal during the All-Star selection episode of Inside the NBA. But no, nothing. If anything, they doubled down on their whole Gobert hate during the actual All-Star game itself, when they allowed Draymond Green to once again run his mouth about the man. Since I'm on Draymond Green, let's talk about Draymond for just a couple seconds here. It is plain and simple to me to see that the man has something against Gobert on a personal level. I don't know if it's jealousy. I don't know if it's envy. The man has 3, soon to be 4, Defensive Player of the Year awards to Draymond Green's 1 award. Now, for all the hard work that Green has put into this Golden State Warriors dynasty, and let's be honest and serious, he has put in a lot of work into that dynasty. I don't think he gets enough credit for his defense being a critical part of why the Warriors have all those championships. He's not getting the recognition that Gobert gets. It probably eats at him. Maybe there's a preconceived thing that he has against French people. I don't know. Maybe he wants to be more popular among the NBA casual fans, and he feels that by attacking another player verbally, consistently, this is his way of getting into the limelight, so to speak. Whatever the case, he simply cannot shut up about Rudy Gobert. The man can't keep his name out of his mouth. Third, we as a society are skewing more and more towards wanting men to start showing emotion. wanting men to feel more compassionate and more open with their feelings, more empathetic. So why are we mocking a man who broke down to tears talking about his mother? This is the type of thing that makes it less likely men will open about their feelings. Because what man who wants to talk about, what's really bothering him is going to want the people that he's talking about this to then turn around and use it against them. This is a perfect example of why men don't want to be mocked about this. Laughing at a man for showing emotion for any reason or mocking that person is exactly how we got to our society being the bottled up mess that it is today. This whole MAGA and political discourse, political divide is a direct result of society bottling up their feelings repeatedly because they don't want to be looked at as lesser because they're opening themselves up and making themselves more vulnerable emotionally. If we are ever going to get out of this mess, we have to look inward first. We can't point the finger at progress or immigrants or this or that. We have to look within ourselves first. What's wrong with us, both collectively and individually? Then and only then can we recognize and admit to ourselves and to each other that we have our faults, that we have our issues, that we are working on resolving these issues. How we get to that point is up for another debate that I'm sure we will likely cover on this podcast at some point. So much like the quarterback landscape in last year's NFL, this year the quarterback landscape in the NFL is promising already to forever change the face of the game. Already announcing his retirement from the game was Ben Roethlisberger. Now, say what you want about the guy off the field, and you'd be within your right to do so, and you'd probably be right. But one thing you cannot say about him on the field was that he was a slouch. Sure, the Pittsburgh defense helped him immensely in winning those Super Bowls. Let's be honest there. But you still need a decent quarterback to help make the plays that he did down the stretch of those games. And as I said, both on this podcast in the last episode and on social media, whoever takes over for Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, be it Dak Prescott or Aaron Rodgers or whoever it may be, all I have to say is good luck. Then there's Tom Brady, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Think of him what you want. You can bring up Spygate, you can bring up Deflategate, usually all the usual knocks against the guy. But the one thing you cannot deny is that he has forever changed the way the game is played. If in fact he is riding off in the sunset and getting ready to enjoy life after football with his knockout of a wife and his gorgeous family, let's be honest. The man walks away with more Super Bowl rings and more records than any quarterback to have ever played in the NFL. He will be forever remembered for being the face of one franchise and then going to another franchise with a new coach, a new system, a new set of faces in a new conference, and still taking that team to win to the Super Bowl. Now, the caveat is that there is talk that he could be coming out of retirement to play one last season, win or lose, with the San Francisco 49ers, which makes sense. He's a Cali guy. The 49ers were his favorite team growing up. In fact, he has gone on record as saying he modeled a lot of his early game after Joe Montana, which is ironic because before Brady, Montana was widely considered the GOAT. I'm not sure I buy it, but stranger things have happened. Like Emmitt Smith in Arizona, Tony Dorsett in Denver, Jerry Rice in Seattle, Deion Sanders in Baltimore. Which brings me to the quarterbacks that are still around. And there are a lot of question marks right now regarding a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL currently. Is Dak Prescott's job in Dallas safe? What will the Broncos do about their quarterback situation? What about the 49ers? If Brady comes back, what happens to Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance? Could we have seen the last of Matthew Stafford? I mean, no better way to retire than on top. Is Russell Wilson on the move? Please no. Could the Packers be looking to trade Aaron Rodgers? Who all are even remotely on teams' radars coming out of the draft? What about the Deshaun Watson controversy and where will he end up? Is Tua safe in Miami? What will the Saints do now that Sean Payton has stepped away? Could Cam Newton be on his way back to Carolina? Where do Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay go from here? I guess the one thing you can always count on in the NFL is the constant winds of change blowing. Just like the wind chill at the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. Next man up. So since Bobby Kotick and Activision Blizzard are no longer viable punching bags for this podcast, I am turning my attention to another scumbag that I'd argue if liberals had the power to cancel things at the snap of their finger, the way conservatives love to claim that they do, they'd cancel this guy. And that would be the owner of the Washington, let me read this real quick. Let me take the Commanders. The Washington Commanders. That's the name you decided to go with. Okay. And that'd be Daniel Snyder, obviously. Well, we'll get to all that here in a bit, but anyway, Snyder is under heavy scrutiny from the NFL and from sponsors after several lawsuits have started to come up in regard to the treatment and of female employees within the Washington camp, particularly the cheerleading squad of the former Washington Redskins. Allegations about sexual misconduct from Snyder, as well as those within his inner circle, have been lingering for the last several years. But now, both the NFL office and several sponsors have gotten involved. So between this and the home stadium falling apart and players refusing to re-sign with the team, and of course the botched name change, it's not been a really good last couple of years for Snyder's Washington football team. And for the record, the name is not terrible in of itself. If they decided to go with the new name and some changes in the color scheme, that would be good. But the name with this current old Washington color scheme, it's less than good. It's like Snyder is allergic to colors other than brown and yellow, which I don't know what that says about him, but eh. Hello again, Raul Smith here with a very important format change announcement. So normally I would end the podcast with a tech tip for dev trainees and whatnot. However, there's been some talk from those within my inner circle that I'm practically giving premium content away for free. So with that in mind, starting in May of 2022, hopefully, if my health holds up, the closing tag will be offering this premium content on Patreon. This has been a long time coming, and I'm more than pleased to announce the return of Dev Tips with Galactic Blue. Stay tuned to the podcast for more information, and for now, back to your regularly scheduled end of show rant. So you've heard me talk on this podcast before about professional wrestling and two particular promotions very recently. That would be All Elite Wrestling and Ring of Honor. We'll get back to Ring of Honor here in a bit. So kind of shelf that maybe in that shelf that's in the background right there. But anyway, Tony Khan, the young owner of All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, he's probably downing his third Rockstar Energy drink of the day as we speak. And it's like 5 o'clock right now. He has made it an almost weekly habit of having these major announcements. He was promising a major announcement the night CM Punk debuted in AEW. He promised major news going into a pay-per-view event that saw the AEW debuts of both Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole. He promised a major acquisition the night Keith Lee debuted, the same night that New Japan's Jay White showed up. But this past week, there was a lot of talk about major announcement that pro wrestling fans don't want to miss. So the speculation began to run roughshod. Was it the signing of free agent Jeff Hardy, who is expected to show up any minute now? Was it a working partnership between AEW and New Japan and Impact Wrestling? Was it the announcement of a streaming deal with HBO Max, who are owned by the same company that owns TBS and TNT? Well, come to find out, it was a little bit bigger than all of that. As I mentioned in a past episode, Ring of Honor was in a bit of a lull period. Well, all the wrestlers and announcers were told that their contracts were null and void, and they were free to pursue other opportunities. And many, like Jay Lethal, Jonathan Gresham, the Briscoe brothers, and so forth, have done just that. There was talk of Ring of Honor, Freudian slip, under a new ownership, unveiling a reimagining, quote unquote, on April 15th. Well, it's not even March 15th, and I am having serious doubts that that's going to happen. I'll tell you why. Sinclair Broadcast Group, the company that owned Ring of Honor for several years, has announced this past week that Ring of Honor was sold to billionaire Tony Khan, the aforementioned owner of All Elite Wrestling, now owns Ring of Honor. So this leaves a lot of burning questions. The first that I'm sure is on everyone's minds is what happens to the talent, the crew, and the announce team for Ring of Honor. Well, as I mentioned before, everybody was essentially let go once Sinclair announced that it was shutting down production of Ring of Honor. All the wrestlers, all the production team behind the scenes, all the announce team were all let go. Many of them have already found footing somewhere else, as I mentioned before. It's very possible a lot of the production team will try to find work in the local or state media sector. I mean, granted, working on lighting for a small cooking show in Tulsa, Oklahoma is probably not the same as working on lighting and fireworks for an independent wrestling promotion, but hey, money is money. As I learned the hard way, get what you can. The second is, what about the promotion itself? Will it go the way of World Championship Wrestling when Vince McMahon bought it back in 2001? Will it stay in name only and fade away after a run on television? Something tells me that's not going to be the case. Ring of Honor is set to induct the first class of its own Hall of Fame, which is set to induct legendary names from that era like CM Punk, Samoa Joe, and Bryan Danielson. Speaking of Joe, there are rumors that AEW is looking to bring in Joe as well as former NXT producer and WWE wrestler William Regal. Although it was just confirmed last night, William Regal is in fact in AEW. Now, nobody knew what to make of this story until after the announcement of Ring of Honor being purchased. Then it all made sense. Joe and Regal are no longer able to do the things that they used to be able to do in the ring, but they still have name value and they still have a brilliant mind for the business. If these two can turn Ring of Honor around and turn it into their own developmental system, the likes of which have only been seen by NXT, that would be wildly beneficial, not just for Ring of Honor, but also to AEW. The last question of mine being, is this going to be a developmental program for AEW? If that's the case, what becomes of their two lesser shows on YouTube, Dark and Elevation? My opinion, keep them. You have the tools now necessary to showcase your developmental talent on a grand scale. Granted, views on YouTube is not the same as, having a show on TBS or TNT. But even if only one of those two shows can be used to showcase Ring of Honor talent, and the other stays to showcase the lesser known talent in AEW, this is still a huge win. Because before now, Ring of Honor was owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group and was only shown in syndication on stations owned by Sinclair, which makes sense. Now this opens the door for YouTube, maybe even follow in Impact's shoes and show the shows on Twitch. Or what if this is something, or the start of something much grander, much bigger? I don't suspect AEW is going to have its own streaming service like WWE had for a while there. But if they were to have an add-on for someone else, that might prove to be beneficial. Say Amazon Prime, say Netflix, maybe even HBO Max, as is being rumored right now. According to speculation, Tony Khan is already in heavy negotiations with Turner Broadcasting to start putting Ring of Honor archive matches as well as newer editions of AEW and Ring of Honor television, possibly even special events or pay-per-view events, on HBO Max as an add-on for their streaming service, which is similar to the arrangement that they have with DC Comics Online or even Crunchyroll. There's a lot of different directions that Tony Khan and the figureheads in AEW could go with this new acquisition. But 3 positive things that could potentially come from all of this. It helps to keep more options open for younger, less developed wrestlers that haven't had the opportunity had Ring of Honor just been bought out by WWE and been allowed to, in CM Punk's words, fade into a tab on a shitty app. His words, not me, not mine. It keeps buzz alive online as news of a potential streaming service and even an invasion-like storyline on television between an AEW team led by Tony Khan and an ROH team led by current free agent Cody Rhodes is keeping people talking on social media about AEW, both the good and the bad. And finally, it keeps AEW solidly in that number 2 option in North America behind WWE. And as I've always said, competition in any line of business is good. Make no mistake, All Elite Wrestling at the tender age of 3 years old is competition now for WWE. They're competing for wrestlers, they're competing for eyeballs, they're competing for buzz. I mean, no sooner than the announcement for Ring of Honor came, then WWE decided to, at that particular point in time, announce that they were inducting The Undertaker into their Hall of Fame. They may not show most of the time, but they are competition. Anybody that denies this is delusional. I'm not saying WWE is going to put, or I'm not saying AEW is going to put WWE or Vince McMahon out of business. That's ridiculous. That's insane. WWE right now is making more money than God with television and streaming rights deals, putting revenue well into the 9-figure range. Then, of course, there's the deal with the Saudi prince. AEW is not going to put WWE out of business. It's just not going to happen. But they are definitely out to prove that they're not the little brother that can't back up their talk. AEW is talking. AEW is walking. And they are here to stay. Hate them if you want. But it is a good time to be a fan of more than just WWE wrestling. Well, that does it for this particular episode of the podcast. I thank everybody for hanging in there with me as I'm struggling to get back into the saddle, so to speak. You know, stuttering and mumbling over my words. I promise I'm not on any particular medications right now. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody that has helped make the podcast as enjoyable as it's been. We're on all the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Video episodes of the podcast are up on the Facebook page, as well as on YouTube. Links can be found in the description, but they can also be found on theclosingtag.com. One other link that you might find in the description, I know I mentioned something earlier, it's a donation link. If you'd be so kind as to donate what you can, if you can, I greatly appreciate it. I know times are tough for a lot of people right now, so I don't expect a great deal. I do this for fun, not for a living. Bear that in mind. But donations are greatly appreciated. I hope that I'll be able to get some other avenues up and running. I mentioned the whole Patreon thing. There's some other things that I've got my hands in the cookie jar, so to speak, on. So I'll hopefully be able to announce those as well soon. Again, thank you for watching and for listening. And remember to always include your closing tags.
This has been a Mad Owl presentation.